Our topic today is why do people fight about nothing, seemingly nothing? I don't know if you've ever fallen into this pattern that sometimes you're speaking to your husband, your wife, your spouse, your partner, your girlfriend, your boyfriend, and just out of nowhere, you erupt into a massive big fight. And for the life of you can't really understand why. It reminds me of Tony Evans, who's a writer. He tells of this experience with his wife. They got married when they were young, in their early 20s. They thought they were the dream of each other. They were perfect. They were church-going people. He loved her to the high moons, the highest heaven, and they just felt that it was a match made in heaven. After they got married, they came back from the honeymoon, they came down from the moon back to earth. They began to have challenges and issues. They were constantly arguing and bickering, and no week passed by unless they have a massive fight. And it happened that way, not just for a week or a month, but years. To the point where he was wondering, well, why is this happening? He didn't really want to divorce because he actually loves his wife and know that she was a good person, but somehow or the other, they seem not to be able to carry out a great, wonderful relationship without triggering each other. And so the question is, why do we keep fighting over nothing? Well, that's a good question. And if you've been fighting over nothing, there is nothing wrong with you. In fact, that's probably the way the body has been designed and it's hardwired, but you simply don't understand how the body functions neurologically. And that's what I'm going to be talking to you about, because there's this little part of the brain called the amygdala. It's like an almond-shaped part just right at the base of the brain, and this is actually the security system of the body. It constantly scanning the environment for threats and making sure that there is nothing wrong, there's no threat in the environment, and if any threat is suspected, it gets triggered, almost like the smoke alarm system of any building. The smoke alarm system is designed to detect smoke. It doesn't differentiate between the different types of smoke, whether it's a burnt toast or cigarette, or in fact the building is really on fire. As long as there is smoke to a certain level and degree, it triggers the alarm system, and the alarm system sets off the sprinklers, meetings get disrupted, people are herded out of the building towards safety until they can determine whether or not it's a false alarm or it's nothing and people could go back, or if it's a real fire. Similarly, the body has this alarm system and it's regulated by the amygdala. Now, the interesting thing about the amygdala is that it cannot differentiate between the types of threats. So if a man jumps out from a dark place in an alley with a gun or a knife, of course, the amygdala gets triggered, you get frightened, your heart pumps, you are ready to run for your life or fight for your life, or some people even freeze, they don't know what to do. And that is what the amygdala was designed for. Unfortunately, when it comes to your spouse and fights with your spouse, the amygdala does the same thing. Because when your spouse disrespects you, they say something that causes you to feel bad, they insult you, they have contempt for you, they criticize you, all of these things trigger the amygdala. And when the amygdala is triggered, it sets out an alarm system. It actually takes over what is known as the prefrontal cortex. What is the cortex? The cortex is that part of your brain that thinks logically. It assesses things. It has compassion and empathy for other people. It can debate. It can discuss. It analyzes things and comes to logical conclusion. But whenever the amygdala gets alerted or triggered, it shuts down the prefrontal cortex. You no longer think. As a matter of fact, you're operating on automatic. Your heart begins to pump blood faster. You hear boom, 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 boom. You're no longer thinking. You're just scanning the environment as on how best to get away, whether or not to fight. And literally you begin to respond to your spouse as if they were a real threat. You no longer see them as this lovely, wonderful person that you got married to. They are real life or death threat. So if they say something hurtful, you say something hurtful back to them. And then they say something even more hurtful, and you up the ante, and then escalation happens. Now, before I go on, I need to help you to realize that when the amygdala really wants to be safe, wants the system to be secure, to be safe, wants you to be secure and safe emotionally as well as physically. And if there is a threat to your emotional or relational, the relationship between the both of you, because we are hardwired to be in groups. That is why we love to be in relationship, and our primary relationship is that of our family, the person we got married to. And we don't like to be out of a group because it spells danger. If you think about a tribe someplace in the backwoods of Africa or South America, these tribes, they huddle together. If one person is isolated from that group, that person is very vulnerable and there is a threat. And so instinctively, even though we are not in some tribal village someplace in the backwoods of Australia, we instinctively want to bond and connect because there is safety. And when it comes to our spouse, that person should be the safest person for us. But if that person is in some way, shape or form signaling that they want to disengage, they want to disconnect, or they don't like you anymore, or they are likely to reject you, it causes emotional dysregulation. That's what and this emotional dysregulation causes an alarm to go off, and you begin to try to be safe. And sometimes counterintuitively, you are fighting for your life and the life of the relationship, and it becomes almost like a drowning man catching onto a straw. And hence, both of you get into this conflict that escalates into a blowout or a shutdown. Why? Unconsciously, subconsciously, although this is very counterintuitive, you are wanting safety. You're wanting connection. You're wanting to bond and bind. And when this is disrupted, it dysregulates. It's very uncomfortable. And so, what is the answer? But before I tell you the answer, I want to tell you something else that makes the situation even worse. During this process of engaging in each other in a dissatisfying way, in a combative way, there is something in our brains called mirror neurons. What that does, it reflects what you are seeing. So generally you see it in babies. If you smile, then the baby smiles. Whatever actions you do, the baby copies those actions. You probably would notice that when someone yawns, another person yawns. And they use it in what they call NLP, where people are to mirror the actions, the tonality, and reflect the nonverbal signals of the other person in order to influence them. But we do this naturally. The problem with that, I don't know if you've ever felt this, that when a person raises their voice at you, you automatically raise your voice too. You match the person. When the person says something hurtful, you automatically fire back with something, if not just as hurtful, even more hurt. And hence there is a loop that happens, and it escalates upwards until there is some massive blowout. Now, the last point I want to mention as to why we fight over nothing, the thing that you're fighting about is not the real thing that you fight about. So the item that triggers the quarrel or the fight or the argument is just the straw that breaks the camel back. In other words, deeper under the surface of those symptoms, I call them symptoms, you're fighting for something that is more meaningful, that is emotionally significant to you, that matters to you in a way that is so impactful that you are responding to those elements of one. If your spouse disrespects you, you probably begin to interpret, the amygdala begin to interpret that as if you don't matter. If you are nobody, that is very hurtful. And that disrespect is the cause of you trying to defend yourself, to validate who you are. Your partner is invalidating you, but so you need to defend and validate yourself. And at the same time, you are triggered to make them feel the way you are feeling. So the $1 million question is, what do we do? And how do we go about doing this? Okay, now first of all, when you become triggered, the amygdala releases into the system some hormones like cortisol and norepinephrine, which are stressful hormones. They activate the system that causes, for you to be on high alert. And what you want to do is to escalate or decrease those hormones that make you feel that way. And one of the ways is to just pause, to stop. Because if you don't pause, the situation becomes more escalated to the point where you say and do something that you didn't mean and say. I don't know if this has happened to you. Right in the heat of the argument, you find that you hear yourself saying things that you don't want to say or you didn't mean to say. And sometimes you do something that you never intended to do or say, and you don't want to get to that point, because at that point your thinking logical part of your brain, which is the cortex, is not functioning. It's offline, as it were. It's shut down, and hence you're instinctively just reacting. And so you want to regulate your emotions. And if you could just simply say, well, look, I'm feeling flooded right now and I don't want to say something that I'm going to regret. Can we just take a moment? Men generally do this. They feel so uncomfortable and dysregulated that they want to get away from the situation. They want to walk out of the room. They want to go for a walk. They want to just get some distance between them. What they're actually doing is trying as much as possible to calm down, to get the levels of cortisol and epinephrine down in their system. Almost like I was thinking of the analogy of people who suffer from hypertension and diabetes. Sometimes they could feel a bit funny and they recognize that maybe their sugar levels are too high. They have to do something to bring the sugar levels down, or the blood pressure is too high. They're now feeling headaches, they're getting giddy, lightheaded, so they need to do something to bring the blood pressure down. Similarly, when you are in a fight or flight or angry mode, your stress hormones are too high, and so you need to do something to bring them down. So the first thing is to pause, to get away from the situation, to get your mind back on stream and online so that you begin to process things better. And then you need to reset. One of the ways of resetting them, there are many different ways, and I'll share with them. I've shared a lot in this guide that I have called the Argument Deactivator. You can pick up a copy. There's a link someplace in the description. So one of the ways to reset is to breathe. Take deep breath. There is a 4-4-6. You take a deep breath at the count of 4. 2, 3, 4. You hold it for 4. 1, 2, 3, 4, and then you release for 6. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. If you do this 4 or 5 times, it actually regulates the system, because as you breathe in, you take in oxygen, you oxygenate the system, which activates your prefrontal cortex or your cortex, and it brings it back on stream. The system flushes out those stress hormones and it regulates back again. That's how it works. And then you reconnect with your spouse, and you say, well, look, that was hard. That was a hard one. I felt myself going overboard, but I'm back now. Can we talk about this? And you approach it in a calm. Your tones are low. Make sure you keep your tone down. The good book says, a soft answer turneth away wrath. And then you listen beyond the words, beyond what just the words your partner. You listen for what is called the emotion behind the words. What is actually, why is your spouse so worked up? And you ask them to explain. And then you reflect back to them. Let me see if I understand what you're saying, are you saying, and you share what you think they're saying. Sometimes this alone helps your partner to realize that you're understanding. And many times what people want is really to feel that they're understood. Those three things can help a person to calm down and connect, even when you probably don't necessarily agree with everything that they're saying. And even if you don't, there are ways of saying, well, look, when you put it that way, I understand. Let me think about it. Can I think about it and get back to you? Now, if you really want some more evidence-based ways of not just talking about it, but really the biology and the neurology behind this, I have created that guide that I call the argument deactivator, and it is ram-packed full of pragmatic, practical things you can do. So click someplace in the link and you probably might be able to get it for a discount if you act soon. So talk soon, and I trust that you would be able to resolve those conflicts that crop up from time to time. By the way, fights and conflicts, they're not things that you should try to get rid of. And I don't think you can anyway. They're inevitable. They're simply portals. What you want are strategies and techniques and ways of navigating through them so that you could become better. I say that they are portals through which you have to climb in order to get deeper connection, intimacy. Stay strong, talk soon, and if you need someone to speak with, if you need to be able to, if you've reached the end of your tether or tether, whichever pronunciation you care, and you don't know what next to do, please feel free again. There's a link in the bio to schedule a consultation with me so that I can help you to unravel those knotty areas of your relationship.